Hey guys, my name is Mark and welcome to Mechanic Mondays. A little introduction. I'm one of the mechanics here for FLX Bicycle. I kind of just answer tickets, questions or concerns anyone has, and I also do service on the side as well. And let's get into it. So for this Mechanic Mondays, I want to go over pretty much everything you need to know about tires. The first thing I want to go over is the different types of tires that you will encounter out in the wild. So there's three main types. There's mountain bike tires, there's road bike tires, and then there's hybrid tires, which is, as you would guess, a combination of the two. So road bike tires are typically just designed to be on asphalt for the most part. They have some tread to them, but a lot of the time they can be considered as slicks, meaning they're almost completely smooth. So this is a great example right here. They're not typically the widest tire either, and unfortunately they're not usually the most comfortable. A lot of the time it is assumed that roads and asphalt are nice and smooth, but you know, if you're in an area with potholes and stuff, it may be a bit more difficult on that regard. But yeah, so this is a good example right here. Another one would be mountain bike tires. So these guys are much more thicker, and there's definitely tread on them, as you could see here. Definitely a lot more prominent, thicker treads as well. Just they're designed to dig into dirt basically. So they're off-road use tires. They're not typically high pressure versus compared to like road bike tires. Mountain bike tires can be as low as 15 PSI, 20 PSI. So the next thing I wanna go over is tire pressure. So when it comes to tire pressure, ultimately it's kind of preference for the most part. I mean, manufacturers do have their recommended tire pressure, which is typically stamped on the tire itself in usually really small lettering and numbers. But ultimately it is just preference in the real world. You just have to remember the pros and cons of going either too low or too high. So if you go too low of a pressure, you do get more grip and you do get a more comfortable ride as well. But you run the risk of getting more flats and punctures, the tire and or tube getting pinched between the ground and the rim. And when you run too high of a pressure, not as comfortable, but you do lessen the chances of getting punctures and flats and all that. Also, you wear out the tire much less too. The next thing I want to go over is the different types of tubes there are. Not tubes, sorry, but specifically the tire valves or tube valves. So there are two main ones. There is the Presta. So this one right here, you can easily tell it's much different than the Schrader valve, which is the counterpart. The stem itself is threaded, and there's a lock ring right here to help keep the valve from moving around, causing noise and vibration when you're riding. And to inflate it or deflate it, there's a little nut on the top there. I hope you guys can see this, where you would have to unscrew and then just, you know, kind of pretend that's all the way out like that. And then once that nut's all the way out, if you were to just press down the core like this, it would release air. And then the other tire valve or tube valve is going to be the Schrader valve. So this is incredibly common. They're basically car tire valves. And in order to release air pressure from this one, you kind of have to have a really long nail or something that's skinny enough to go into the valve and kind of push that core down. That's about it for tire valves. Most shops are gonna carry this one. This is the most popular of the two. And a lot of the time for those who have pumps for Schrader valves, they will not be compatible for Presta, but you can easily get an adapter, which most shops sell for like $2, where you can leave it on the Presta valve, and you can use Schrader compatible pumps with it, and you'd be totally fine with that. So when it comes to inflating tires, it's pretty self-explanatory for the most part when getting a pump and mounting it onto the Presta or Schrader valve or whichever you have. If you don't have a pump with you, kind of getting a feel for it is the next best thing you can do. As long as you're not able to push the tire down all the way to the point where you can actually feel the rim, you should be fine for the most part. But do keep in mind, if you do end up riding like that for a long period of time, just be extra careful when going on any rough terrain, or you don't want to bunny hop or jump off curbs or anything that could potentially puncture the tube or the tire. When it comes to inflating, one thing that you do have to make sure is that the tire is properly seated onto the rim, meaning that on the rim there's a place for the bead of the tire, which is essentially the wall, not the wall of the tire, but the portion of the tire that makes contact to the rim. You want to make sure that is seated onto the tire correctly. And one way to know if it is that, let me see, on this mountain bike tire you can see it clearly. I want to see like right there, there's a line that kind of follows the bead around. So if that line isn't consistent throughout the entire rim of the wheel, then that means it's not seated correctly. And in order to fix that, it's fairly simple. You kind of just want to keep inflating it until it kind of pops into place. It's a bit scary while you do it too, because you will literally hear a popping noise, and it's going to catch you by surprise a lot of the time too. You don't want to overinflate. You kind of want to be careful with that. If you're kind of reaching max inflation on the tire, you want to be just a bit more careful. Maybe instead of doing that, you want to deflate it and maybe spray some soapy water into that particular area to get it seated correctly and then inflate it. A lot of the time that usually works. So the last thing I want to mention is, regardless if you're a road biker or a mountain biker, or even if you're running tubeless, because we all know going tubeless isn't a surefire way of things, always a good idea to carry a tube with you at all times, because the last thing you want is to be stranded in the middle of nowhere, or if you're a mountain biker like me, stranded under a really hot baking sun. So you always want to carry tubes, or at least one tube, sorry. You always want to carry tire levers, and if possible, if you can fit it on your saddlebag or on your backpack or whatever pack you carry around with you, or on your bike, carrying a hand pump as well, preferably with a tire gauge. Another thing that you can carry instead of a tire pump or portable pump would be, or hand pump, sorry, would be CO2s. So this is condensed CO2 cartridges that you can use with the trigger, and that would inflate your tire very fast, a lot easier than doing a little hand pump. So my name is Mark, and that is it for today's Mechanic Monday. If you still have any questions or concerns, don't hesitate to email us whatsoever. It is support@flx.bike. Again, support@flx.bike. I really hope that this video was helpful in terms of troubleshooting issues with your baby maker, and I'll see you next week. Thank you.